This is the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. Okay, 3, 2, 1, and welcome everybody to this episode of the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. I am your humble host, John Allen. Real quick before I get started with this conversation, I want to tell you all to please subscribe at your podcast platform of choice. If you're watching this on YouTube, that's great. That's where I want you to be. Watch this on YouTube. Subscribe. And if you're a first-time viewer, ring that bell icon. Okay, here we go. What's up, Dwayne?
Hey, how you doing? Good morning.
I'm doing well, man. I've got my day started. I'm ready to go.
Yes. I see that from your Facebook post. You went hiking this morning, and kind of I was like, okay, I'm behind the eight ball there.
Yeah. No, I wake up at roughly 6 o'clock every morning. I was up at about 6:04 this morning, and Snoopy was off work last night, so she was there too. And I'm like, okay. Hey, let's do this. And very often when she is home in the mornings, because she works night shift, when she is home in the mornings, we do go out and take a walk. But that's something that I haven't been able to do for almost 2 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I've had all these operations on my shoulder, and I mean, I've really been almost literally flat on my back for about the last year because of my shoulder, and then I had a neck operation too. So it's been rough. So now that I'm back up on my feet, it's a slow climb.
Okay. Yeah.
But I am getting out there and doing those walks, and it's beautiful. You know, I don't like living in the city. I'm here in Drummond. I don't like living in the city. But what is nice about it is just, you know, right a couple of blocks up the road, all of the mountain trails start up in the hills and mountains up above the city. So that's where we go as often as we can.
Yeah. I would say we're pretty much avid hikers. We haven't really been, the wife and myself, we haven't really been of late because she has a little bit of some problems with her knees. There's some talk about possible surgery, but we've been doing some things. And of course, where we live we're in Egarden, which is in Vestlandet, and it's in a little bit outside of Bergen, so about a 45-minute drive from Bergen to us.
Yeah.
So
beautiful area of the country, by the way.
Yes. And as most people say, wait a minute, you went from New York City to Egarden.
Yeah.
You literally went from the city to the boonies.
Well, we have our place up in Finnmark, which is even more isolated. I mean, it's literally on an island out in the middle of the ocean. Wow. And people say all the time, well, you went from Chicago to that? But I have to correct them because I didn't technically, I'm born and raised in Ohio, out in the country in Ohio. So it really wasn't that big of a switch up for me.
Right.
There's a bigger thing to move from Ohio to Chicago than it was for me to move from Chicago to Norway. Yeah.
Right. I actually have two buddies of mine, both military, both from living in Ohio. One lives in North Canton, which is
North Canton.
He's literally like, we always talk about like the Hall of Fame and everything.
Yeah.
He's like, dude, every time somebody comes to visit me, it's like they want to go there, but for me, it's just like an everyday thing.
Yeah,
he's like it's about a 15-minute drive from the hall.
Well, North Canton is just right down the road from where I grew up. Yeah, little place called Norton. It's just right down the road. Maybe, I don't know, 20 minutes maybe down the highway.
Yeah, speak to him.
Yeah. No, so you came from New York City. How long ago was that? How long have you been here?
I've been here since 2012.
Okay.
I came summer of 2012. We actually got married that year. So yeah, I guess you could say somewhat of a Norwegian. I have dual citizenship
Do you have dual? Okay.
Most of the Americans that have been here quite some time. So I'm, half Norwegian, half American, or vice versa, if you will.
But what did that do? What did that do in your mind when it comes to your identity to actually get Norwegian citizenship?
You know what's so funny? For me, it wasn't really like a big thing. It was more of pomp and circumstance. But I thought in my head, all of the people who come to the U.S. as immigrants and actually get naturalized citizenship. And you see the difference. It wasn't that big of a deal. I think they're actually making it more of a thing now where you kind of, like with us, you know, in the States, you have to know certain things about the Constitution. You have to
Right.
know certain
Yeah.
laws, and that's kind of part of the whole naturalization process. Whereas here, it was just kind of like, okay, you paid the paperwork, you paid for the paperwork, you
Yeah.
did all your stuff,
Yeah.
and hey, we're gonna have a ceremony if you want to join. So at that time, my granddaughter, yes, I'm a young grandpa,
Ah.
she was visiting. So my wife, myself, and her, we went, and a friend of her nephew's, he was getting naturalized. So he's half Thai, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so it was pretty good, but this was a couple years back. But I don't think it was really that same effect that I think most of I see with the immigrants from coming to the U.S. have, where it's like a big deal.
Right, right. No, they seem to. It's kind of weird here in Norway. They seem to downplay it at the same time as they're very quick. At the same time as they're very quick to throw it in people's faces that you're not whole. You're not totally Norwegian.
No,
You get that constant reminder. You're an immigrant here. You're not really one of us. You're here only by our good graces.
right. Well, yeah, I do kind
Have
of
you
see that,
experienced
but
that? Do you see that?
somewhat. But I think what happens with most people, let's say, for instance, I go somewhere and you're on the list to come to a building, for example, for work,
Mm.
and then say, for instance, the military base, you have to have Norwegian citizenship
Yeah.
to get on the base.
Mm.
So a lot of times, like the company I work for, I don't know if it's legal to mention it, but I won't.
Sure.
But they do office furniture installation. It's a major company. You've probably seen them quite around the area, especially in Oslo.
IKEA.
So getting on the installation, you have to have Norwegian citizenship.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when I come up, you'll see the lady looking at the driver's license or the passport, and it's like, you get that up, down kind of thing. Like, okay, it's an American or an English name, but he has Norwegian citizenship. What's going on here? Yeah.
Do they pronounce your name properly?
For the most part.
Do they?
And what
Okay.
happens is I'll start the conversation off as most people, we want to, kind of impress people with our Norwegian. And then most of these people working on posts, as far as the military members, they're our version of ourselves when we were 2021.
Yes.
So it's like, oh, okay, cool. But then so they automatically start speaking English, and it's like, okay.
I get that a lot. As I've been podcasting more, and of course my podcast is in English only. I'm speaking more English than I used to before I started podcasting.
Yeah.
Because before that, I still speak only English at home with my family, with my wife and our two kids.
Right.
Only English.
Oh, okay.
But outside, for business, music, whatever, all of that stuff was being done in Norwegian. But now there's less of that because of Corona. So I'm speaking less Norwegian and more English. And I really felt it. What was that, a couple weeks ago after the Derek Chauvin verdict? And I was on NRK and TV2. Yes. And I mean, I guess it went okay, but I could tell that I was like, okay, I'm kind of searching for my words in a way that I hadn't done, because I am speaking less Norwegian now than before.
Yeah, I do find that, but with the company that I work for, there are a lot of younger guys working there. Of course, we have the 30 to 40 somethings and 50 somethings, but the crux of the workers are very much like our military or any country's military. Yeah. It's the 20 somethings, if you will. So those individuals or those guys are a little bit more apt to speak English. So I'll starting off the conversation.
Start off in Norwegian.
By the end of the day, it's like ending up in English. And then especially with the kind of trades work, you have different people working in a lot of buildings at the same time. And you get the other trades kind of looking over like, okay, what's going on here? They're speaking English, Norwegian, what's.
So has your experience here in Norway been, for the most part, a good one?
I'd say it's like
deep breath.
Yeah, it's like there's been good and bad, mostly good, but there's been some bad. But I think what I get mostly is what I like to refer to as the matrix anomaly.
Okay, explain.
And what I mean to that is that, like,
I haven't seen the Matrix yet. I think I am the only human alive that has not seen a single Matrix movie. I haven't.
Wow.
I just haven't.
Okay.
It's on my list. It's on my list, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I find is with being a Black American or an African American living in a country like Norway, you are for the most part an anomaly, because for the most of Norwegians' interaction with people of color, especially Black people, are immigrants. Our Eritreans, our Somalians, our very few from Congo and other regions of Africa and so forth. So when they hear you speaking, it's almost like a you know, so it's like, oh, you know, so I find that I get that more. It's like, okay, so I get the what I call the Facebook meme. So where are you really from?
Oh, I've literally gotten that phrase thrown at me several times. Where are you from? Oh, I'm from the United States. Yeah, but before that.
Yeah.
And it's, come on now.
A funny story about that. My wife and I were at a wedding many years ago of a Norwegian language classmate of mine. She is from Bosnia Herzegovina. The husband obviously is Norwegian, and my wife and I went to the wedding. So I knew a lot of people from their side of the family and other people like that. And then of course, Aegon is a very small community, so everybody kind of knows everybody. So I guess one of his friends were very kind of like curious, like, who's this guy? We're walking around like Obama, greeting everybody and saying hello, and you know. And so he comes up to me, he's like, "Hi, my name is Ronnie. What's your name?" I was like, "Hi, I'm Dwayne. Where are you from?" Of course, we were having this conversation in Norwegian, and then he goes, I said, "Well, I'm from." As a typical New Yorker, we always start the conversation off with, "Oh, I'm from New York."
Yeah.
You know, well, you know, okay, well, so where are you from originally? And then I said to him in Norwegian, "Do you want the long story or the short story?" And then he's like, "What do you mean by that?" And I said, "Well, the short story is born and raised in New York. My parents are from St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. The long story is about 500 years ago." Before I could even finish the conversation, he knew where I was going with it. And he just said, "You are so funny." Yeah. No, I broke the ice, but it was like a funny interaction.
Yeah. No, I have no problem with curiosity. You know, when people question and they want, you know, they want the backstory and everything. But I've had people tell me, pretty much insist that I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not from the United States. For whatever reason, I'm hiding from them where I'm really from. And it's like, come on now.
No,
I've even had Africans. I had a Somali guy. I did a stand-up show in Oslo. This is maybe, almost 18 months ago, before Corona hit anyway. And I'm talking to this Somali guy who was out in the crowd. I'm talking to him afterwards, and he says, asked me where I'm from, and I said, United States. He says, "Oh, well, when did you immigrate to America?" I said, I never immigrated. "Oh, well, your parents must have." Right. I'm like, no, they didn't. You know, and a lot of people have trouble getting their heads around that whole. I mean, for us, it's our life. But for some people, they have a little trouble getting their heads around it. I have no problem with the curiosity. I like that kind of a conversation. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think with my African immigrant counterparts, what I find the most is that there's this kind of like, "Oh, cool, he's one of us," and then he's from the U.S. But then it's like there's a little bit of like a wall, and I think, as my wife says, that the problem is you being, even though you're African American, even though your parents are from the Caribbean, for them you're kind of American westernized culture. Right. And then on top of that, my wife is a school teacher. She's a junior high school teacher in the local high school, junior high school. So for them, she kind of represents the establishment. I'm doing the air quotes if you didn't see that.
I saw it. Yeah.
there is sometimes with a lot of my counterparts, there's that like kind of standoffishness. And
I've gotten that too.
Where they're from, anybody that's part of the establishment is kind of like Gestapo and kind of infiltrating. And I'm like, I'm just me, and you have nothing to do with my interaction with them.
Right.
But there is somewhat of a standoffishness I find every now and again.
I caught some heat from a bunch of Somalis when I came here, and I started a Norwegian course, but that only lasted for 2 days because in the class there was 4 or 5, maybe 6 Somali men who, the first day in the class and the teacher has everyone introduce themselves and say where they're from and what brought them to Norway. So these guys are like, yeah, Somalia, refugee, war, this, that, and the other. And I guess I was pretty naive because I told my whole story. Yeah, United States, police officer, U.S. Marine.
Yeah. Especially the background with Somalia.
Exactly, in our military. Yeah, and all of them just, and I'm like, okay, this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
So they gave me the cold shoulder that whole day. I went back the next day and stuck it out for maybe the first half of the class, and I just walked out. I said, this isn't going to work. These guys are too hostile. It's just not going to work. So that was, but that's not typical. For the most part, any African brothers and sisters that I run into here are quite. I mean, it's a friendly, the start of a new friendship type of thing. The sharing of ideas and the sharing of experiences and all of that stuff. But yeah, every once in a while I get that impression. I had a guy from Senegal. This place I was working, I'm not going to say where it was, this place where I was working maybe 15, 16 years ago. And this dude says to me, he says, yeah, you're from the United States, right? I said, yeah. He says, but do you know where your people come from? And I knew what he was getting at.
Right, of course.
And I said, I'm not in a situation to where I would know,
Yeah.
And he started in on me talking about, I'm exposing my weakness. I'm exposing my my lack of interest in my roots and this, that, and the other, because I didn't know what part of Africa my bloodline can be traced to. And that's probably the most radical reception I've ever gotten from an African here in Norway, was that brother trying to tell me that I was less than because I didn't have any knowledge of where my people were from in Africa.
No, I've never gotten that.
That's one example, and that is the worst example. And then those Somali guys. But for the most part, I'd say 9 out of 10 of my experiences with Africans here has been nothing but friendly.
Yeah, same with myself. I've never gotten that, but that conversation has come up in a barbershop that I used to frequent. And the conversation was about where you're from and so forth. And
wait a minute, they have black barbershops here in Norway?
Yes, they do. I was actually, funny story, my first ever haircut in Norway was at a old school, with the little pole with the red, white, and blue kind of swirling pole thing going around. It was an older Norwegian gentleman. And, I just kind of told him a little bit off the side, such, this, that, and the third. So he kind of did it. And you could tell it was like this kind of scared interaction.
Yeah.
My wife was there because we were actually going up to Kvamskogen, if you're familiar with that area. Yeah. We were going away for the weekend at her sister's cabin. So typical, I don't want to say it this way, but typical Black American guy, we got to get our haircut before we do anything.
Right.
It could be something as simple as like you're just having a couple friends over for a barbecue. Like, I got to run to the barbershop and get a haircut before. So I went and got the haircut. But there are a couple of African-owned barbershops I'm surprised that in Oslo you're not familiar with that.
Well, actually, there is one here in Drammen. I was kind of playing a little bit, but that is an issue. Especially for Black women. Every once in a while, some of the Black American women that I know that are here in Norway, you'll see they kind of reach out. Does anybody know where I can find this hair care product? Or does anybody? Yeah, it can be an issue depending on where you are. But I solved that problem. You see, I just shave.
Well, listen. Don't mind the little, fade going on. There's a landing going. So this summer, I think, the landing will actually become a whole moon surface.
A whole moon surface. No, I've been shaving my head for pretty much since I got here, and that was simply because of. Now, I got here in 2002. Wow. And at that time, there were no Black barbers in Drammen. Since then, there have come barbers who can do black hair, but at that time, there wasn't anything, so I just started cutting it myself. And after a couple of months of that, trying to work a fade in, myself is
Yeah, yeah,
that's hard to do. But I
yeah,
since then I've
yeah,
just been shaving
yeah.
it down.
Yeah, I do a pretty good job here and there, but I get lazy. So it's like I think I'm
Yeah,
coming to that point where it's just like,
shave it
dude, just let it
off.
go. Yeah,
Just
just
shave
let
it.
it go.
Yeah,
There'll be
yeah,
less to worry about, and But no, my experience with the kind of our African brother and counterparts has been for the most part good.
yeah,
But as I was saying, that conversation came up about where you're from or where your parents' background,
yeah.
and we got talking about food. And where my parents are from in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, it's a very interesting kind of background because they have the Danish, Norwegian
Yeah,
kind of colonization.
yeah.
Then the U.S. bought the Virgin Islands, so there are a lot of streets
I was going to say a
in the
lot of
Virgin
streets,
Islands
a
that
lot of
have those
buildings are
very
named
kind of
after. Yeah.
Danish names. The capital in St. Thomas is actually named after a Danish princess,
Yep.
and there's a statue of a Danish Norwegian admiral in the middle of the capital. So my wife and I always have these kind of like, conversations about,
Yeah.
hey, maybe somewhere down the
Maybe.
line, yeah, that story,
Yeah.
amen. So, but food wise, we were talking about a thing called uh, cuckoo. Well, at Caribbean, it's called a fungi. It's like a cornmeal kind of mash, if you
I
will.
had some
And
fungi when I was on St. Croix for a powerlifting competition, the North American
oh,
Powerlifting
okay,
Championships in
yeah, yeah,
2016,
yeah.
and I had that.
Example of St. Croix. You have the capital is Frederickstad.
Frederickstad, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have those kind of names, and people like, okay, and the same thing like you have the Grut here in
Yes. Yeah.
Norway. And that's something when I first got here, my wife was like, "Oh, I'm gonna make this thing we call kveldsmat or evening food," and she's like, "Oh, it's kind of a rice thing." At this time, I was just visiting, and she goes, "It's kind of like a rice porridge. You may or may not like it." And I'm thinking, like, "Wait a minute, you talking about porridge?" And she's like, "Yeah, what do you know about that?" I said,
Come on,
Mecca,
that.
my mom is from the island, so we realized very quickly how a lot of the influences from the kind of
Yeah.
Scandinavian culture is in the islands of St. Thomas, St. Croix,
And I knew about
and
that
St. John.
connection. I knew about that connection from the colonization before I went to St. Croix, but it was interesting to actually get there and to see it
Right.
and to talk with some of the people. Some of those islanders have very Norwegian sounding names.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
I met a dude at the hotel, and on his name tag it said Christian, but he pronounced it Christian, just like
Yeah.
they would here in
Yeah.
Scandinavia. And it was like,
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
that was a great experience. I didn't get to see too much of the island, but there were a couple of trips from the hotel and out into town to some stores and things. And then, of course, around the hotel, it was actually a resort. And I got to speak to a lot of the islanders there. Man, there's some beautiful people, so
Yeah.
friendly. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost a cliche about how friendly everyone is in the Caribbean, but good Lord, there on St. Croix was just yeah, and I can't help but remember also how different it was to see so many black people.
Yep.
Just looking around, and it's like we are the majority here, and it was odd. It was an odd feeling. Not, and it's not like it's something I'm very preoccupied with here in Norway, but at that time in 2016, I'd been here for 14 years, where I'm the only brown face around. And then to go to St. Croix, and
Yeah.
it's like, well,
Yeah.
okay, this exists.
Yeah. I often laugh with my kind of inside and also with the wife when we are visiting family or friends that are from also Caribbean background.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you ever seen the movie Jumping the Broom.
No, I haven't.
Okay. Well, there's a movie called Jumping the Broom with Paula Patton, who was married to, I forgot the gentleman's name she was married to, but he was like a pop star. Anyway, her character is getting married to Laz Alonso, who and then it's kind of like the differences in the family. And then there's this one scene with Angela Bassett, who's playing her mom, and then the other lady who's actually the sister, who's indirectly the real mom. and you can see the difference. Like Angela Bassett's like this coffee, dark coffee,
Yeah.
brown, and then the other lady's like a latte mocha, and she's like, well, how you guys, in her head, the one lady who's the assistant is a white lady. She's like, well, how are you guys sisters when she's like a dark coffee and you're like a latte mocha? And in my head I'm laughing, like when I go home or if I'm visiting my relatives that are from the Caribbean, how it's like this kind of shade from
Yes.
this very light to this very dark. Like my dad
Same
is
thing in my family. Yeah.
right, very dark, and my mom is very light. Like, and my mom is like that kind of Lena Horne kind of light.
Yeah.
So it's like
yeah.
people kind of scratch their heads, and I often laugh that like as Black people, we run the gamut from like, are you white or black to like he's blue black.
I have a picture of hanging up on the wall in my living room of my grandmother, my mother's sister, and my mother, and three very distinct shades from my mother's chocolate brown to my grandmother's pretty much white. And it's and that puzzles Norwegians. They look at my kids, for example. I don't want to put too much information out there about my kids, of course. But my daughter is extremely light skinned. I mean, she's as light skinned as any Norwegian. And I think let me back up a little. I think Norwegians are used to, if there's mixed race kids with African blood, they're used to the pure African blood, which of course, when that is then mixed with a Norwegian, it's going to bring out different characteristics.
Right.
But me, I call myself watered down. I mean, I am what I am, but it's watered down from that pure African bloodline. So when I had my kids come out, it really confused Norwegians. I had people, good friends of mine, who were kind of hinting around, like trying to ask me, is that really my child? Did something happen and that's not my kid? Yeah.
Yeah. I remember reading an article about a lady who was married to a white guy, and she was with the kid in the park, and people assumed that a lot of people would just gather together, moms with their kids in the park, and assume she was the nanny. It's like, no,
I heard
this
about
is
that.
actually my child. And the child was very light as a result of the mixing of the two.
Yeah.
And, I do see that a lot. And it's like my wife and I will have conversations about, she'll try to explain to me, oh, yeah, I saw a colored guy or whatever, you guys should get to know each other. And I'm like, or she'll try to describe to me someone she was having an interaction. And I'm like, well, like, what were they like? And as an American, especially as a New Yorker, where you have so many people from so many different backgrounds, so many shades and so forth. And I'm like, was he like a light skinned guy, or was he like, she's like, oh, he was just a colored guy. And I'm like, well, and we'll have this conversation. I'm like, well, it's like, it could be the sliding scale. And she's like, oh, you guys have too many distinctions.
and maybe we do. Maybe we do. I've had people here tell me that we are too preoccupied with skin color. I wouldn't say we're preoccupied with it, but we just notice it. And because of the social political nature of the United States, it is to greater or lesser degree, for good and bad, an issue. It is an issue in the States.
Yeah. It's so funny. I remember a couple of years back, I was in Kiwi. I was talking with a buddy of mine. He's from Eritrea.
For those non-Norwegian listeners, Kiwi is a grocery store chain here in Norway.
Yeah, sorry. And he was with his two daughters who had just come over not too long after he'd gotten here. So he was introducing himself, and we were like, "Hey, how's it going?" And then the kids saw me, and at this point, they had already started to speak Norwegian.
Yeah.
And so we were having the interaction in Norwegian, and his daughter's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And then I was like, "Hi, nice to meet you." And then one of the daughters was like, "Do you speak, Tigrinya, which is the Eritrean language?" And I'm like, "No, unfortunately, honey, I don't." And she looked at me and she looked at her dad, and she says in Norwegian, like, "Papa, how come he doesn't speak our language if he looks like us?"
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, out of the mouth of babes. It just, Yeah.
I had a guy, older gentleman. This guy's got to be up in his 70s. He's married to a Kenyan woman.
Okay.
And it was really strange because I've known this guy. He works out at the gym that I used to go to.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's just a reminder that Corona has really changed things up. I went from training religiously at a gym here locally
Right.
to buying all of my own equipment. I have my own home gym. I'm missing that gym atmosphere with other people. Anyway, this is a guy who was at that gym, and we didn't really know each other. I've never been to his home. He's never been to mine, but I knew he was married to a Kenyan woman. And I just assumed that he knew I was from the United States. But then one day he asked me, or he said something in some weird language. I'm like, what did you say? He says, you need to practice your Swahili.
Yes. I was going to say it's Swahili.
And I'm like, why would I practice Swahili? And it's not my Swahili. And I had to explain to him that I'm not from Africa. I'm from the United States. And that was a shock to him.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, it's that perception thing. And I don't mind the curiosity. I don't mind having that conversation, but it was rather odd that he just assumed. But I don't know. I guess it's all in what the atmosphere is. It's all about where one finds oneself professionally or socially. But I get the impression that most Norwegians automatically assume that I am a refugee from some war-torn African land. Until we talk and they get to know me.
Right.
Maybe they've seen me. Maybe they've seen me on TV, so they know a little bit of my story or something. But very often, in fact, most of the time, if it comes up, if it's an issue about where I'm from, they almost always assume that I'm from a war-torn African country somewhere.
Right. Yeah. Initially, that bothered me, but then afterwards, I kind of came to the conclusion that you have to understand it's perception is reality. Their interaction with people of color has to do with more or less those individuals that are coming from other countries in Africa as refugees. And there was a part of me that goes, I would say in my head, kind of my movie head, I would say, Jay-Z and Beyonce are African American, right? Denzel is Black American, right? And then it often bothered me that how could you see these people on TV, the Will Smiths, the Jay-Z's, the Denzel Washingtons, who you clearly know are African American, and then you see me and you make the assumption of where you're from.
I'll tell you why.
You can't wrap your head around the fact that there are just normal, everyday African Americans that aren't Obama, that aren't.
But I have a theory. I have a theory on that. I think that Norway suffers from a widespread case of social arrogance. Now, what do I mean by that? I think a lot, I'm going to get in trouble here, but I'm going to say it. I think a lot of Norwegians feel that Norway is the promised land for everyone. Mm-hmm. Now, Norway is a beautiful country. It's a great place to live. I've been here for 19 years, so it must be good. It is good. I think it is good.
Yeah.
But it's not this golden nation in the clouds, this paradise that a lot of Norwegians think it is. And when they have that social arrogance, they assume that anyone who chooses to come here came here for a better life, came here because they're running from oppression. So they just couldn't imagine that average middle class Black American would, if you're here, it must be because you had it bad where you were before.
Right.
And if you had it so bad, it must be because you're from Africa. I truly believe that is the reason behind that line of thinking. It's that social arrogance that a lot of Norwegians have. But and then also not all Norwegians are properly informed and educated about the current, to say the least, about the history of America, but also about current America. Some Norwegians, quite a few of them, have an impression that if you're Black in America, unless you're Barack Obama or Will Smith or Denzel Washington, if you're not them, then you have it just absolutely horrible. See, and it's laughable. I mean, we're proof that that's not the way it is. Yeah. It is that way for some of us, but there's also us, the middle class, the moderately successful, People who just happen. I tell people I met my wife on a Friday. I blacked out, woke up on Sunday, and I was in Norway. That's how quickly it happened. But that's, but we come here for other reasons. We come here for love. Some people come here for education, for business, and things like that. But when they see our brown skin, they just assume that it's a tragedy that brought us here. Social arrogance, Norwegian social arrogance.
And then I think it's also, I remember most recently on a Facebook group that I'm in, there was talk about the whole Black Lives Matter and all of these different kind of things. And I kind of had my little spiel and went on as to what I thought was the issue with that particular topic that was being discussed in the group. And I said, I also think that you have to understand, as the younger children that are growing up in Norway, especially the immigrants, they kind of create this kind of subculture, and I call it the Lord of the Flies effect, where they're imitating what they think is the more popular culture. So say, for instance, with Black Americans, the popular culture is the hip hop, R&B kind of culture and all of those things that go with it. And I remember a couple of years back when I first came to Norway, my wife's niece, she was come over because it's curiosity. And she was younger at the time, maybe like 6 or 7-ish. As she came, it was in the summertime. So as she would come over day after day, I noticed the coloring book pictures started turning a little more browner, and she would come over with her then turn frontwards Frozen hat. I think it was Miley Cyrus at the time. And then it kind of slowly went from the front to the side to the back, and then it was like this yo.
She's turning up her blackness. The more it goes at an angle,
and I said to myself, this is just her perception of what she thinks Black Americans are, based on what is probably being shown.
Isn't that interesting?
In popular culture.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
I have I threw a little bit of that into my stand-up routine when I do my stand-up comedy, because it's fascinating. And I think it's laughable. I cannot be offended by it. I laugh about it. How, just like you said, how Norwegians, young people mostly, but also some older people, our age and up, they have that Hollywood or that MTV perception of what it means to be Black in America, and then they imitate that over here, and it's like, you know, what are you doing? You are you blacker than me? You know, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Norwegian kid, dressing like this, that, and the other, picking up slang terms that get infused into the Norwegian, but they're using these hip-hop slang terms, and it's an interesting phenomenon. I can't get upset at it. I just laugh at it, but it is really, really interesting.
Yeah,
that they have this twisted view. I don't know, twisted's a little bit harsh of a term, but they're misled. They're misled by the media,
right?
By
and
what they.
Just the media. I think again, it's the popular culture.
Yeah.
And a couple of years back, my wife and I went to the Kevin Hart concert in Oslo,
yes,
which was fun. I think he's kind of one of those like very active comedians. I love his act. So as I'm looking around the room, yes, there were, of course, because it's Oslo, there were a little bit more people of color, but there were a lot of times when he said jokes that I thought was very, what I like to refer to as Black humor. And I'm looking around the room, and there was a younger couple sitting next to us. And I said to the guy in Norwegian, I said, do you get some of the jokes? He goes, not everything, but I've watched a lot of the YouTube videos, but there's some things I didn't get. And I said, aha, this is where that nuance of languages, that kind of nuance of Black culture comes into play. Like, for instance, the hot comb or...
Right.
Yeah.
Now, and that is a challenge. When I do my stand-up, I was talking earlier about I speak only English at home, but actually I'm wrong, because when I do my stand-up routine, that's in English as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I do that because I don't want anything I don't want to be filtered. And when I speak Norwegian, I'm somewhat filtered, as far as choice of words and playing on words and stuff. So I do my stand-up routine in English. And I found out, because I didn't do stand-up in the States. This is a new thing I've been doing here in Norway. Okay. Right. Yeah. But I found out right away that I'm going to have to change my whole presentation, meaning I'm going to have to change my subject matter, because these people don't really get everything. I had gotten used to my wife. Now, and I tease her constantly. I don't know how she puts up with it, but after 20 years of that, she understands where the black humor is coming from, because I've been
Right.
exposing her to that since day one.
Right.
So she's not typical for a Norwegian when it comes to understanding American or especially black humor. And I found that out right away, but it's been a fun challenge to have to rethink, okay, what am I going to say that's funny? Because I have to tailor it, because they're not going to understand the reference. I remember there was, I had worked out a new bit and I was going to talk about how Norway is changing. You know, the racial makeup of Norway is changing. It's getting more and more brown. Yeah. And I had a real funny routine, and I had, and I was that was my opener. That was my opening routine. So the DJ that was doing the thing, I had him play, what's it called? Mercy Me, The Ecology by Marvin Gaye. Oh, yes. Mercy, mercy me. Yeah. Things ain't what they used to be. Right. And I came out kind of, vibing to that, and I sang a couple of lines, and then I referred to the song about things not being what they used to be, and everybody had just this blank look on their face in the audience, and I just had to take a step back, and I says, "You guys have never heard that song, have you?" And everybody, no, and I'm like, and that would have, the whole routine would have worked anywhere else in the States, but here in Norway, because very few people know Marvin Gaye's music, and definitely nobody has heard that song, it just didn't work. And it told me I really got to change things.
Yeah. You know what I find funny when you mentioned about like using the music and it has refers to different cultures and how people respond. The bodybuilder, Kai Green,
yes,
when he does a lot of free posing, I noticed that he doesn't really use hip hop or R&B. He uses what I would like to refer to as more pop music, and I think it kind of adds to
a broader
how
appeal.
People interact with him as a bodybuilder, especially when he does the free posing, which he's very flexible. He does a lot of kind of moonwalking dancing moves, if you know who that
for you people
is.
Out there who are watching or listening to this, you've got to check out Kai Green, Kaigreen. I think he is the best bodybuilding poser of all time. Yes. His posing routine is so dynamic, and you're right, the music that he chooses, where a lot of bodybuilders will go for that hip hop, R&B type of music in the background when they're posing. But yeah, Kai Green takes music that's more accessible to a broader audience.
Yeah. I kind of noticed that right away, and it was funny when you mentioned about how people respond when you came out to the Marvin Gaye versus had you probably chose, let's say, Metallica, Back in Black, and be like, yeah, I'm back in black. And then they probably would laugh because they kind of get the innuendo of the joke.
AC/DC, Back in Black. Yeah.
I'm sorry. AC/DC.
And I actually thought of trying to redo that whole routine, but using AC/DC, Back in Black. I didn't, I never got around to doing it. I just totally dropped that little bit in my routine, but I did think of using AC/DC's Back in Black and just redoing things.
Oh, on the music side of it, right before we got on, about like say 9-ish, I turned on the TV and we have, as with most everybody, a smart TV. So I kind of went to Spotify. I was like, I'm not going to do any podcasts because I'm going on a podcast, because my day usually starts off with some sort of podcast.
Does it really?
So my I think I'm becoming my father, but just the 21st century version. His day was started with the news and coffee. My day gets started with coffee and podcasts. And I decided instead to kind of go the Spotify route with music. And I chose, they have like the ones where you could choose just like, okay, this is just a Friday kind of groove. First song comes up is one of your favorite artists, probably your favorite artist based on what I remember hearing in a couple podcasts ago, Prince.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, I guess we were supposed to have this conversation today.
There you go. Yeah. Which song was it? Do you remember?
It was Controversy. Yeah. And I was like, okay.
Great album. That whole album is great. Yeah. No, Prince is by far my favorite musician. I saw him in 2011, the day, 2 days after the terror action in Oslo and Utøya. And I can't even put, you see, I'm getting quiet. I can't even put words on it. I've never seen a concert like that.
Yeah.
The entertainment in it, the musicianship, the artistry of it all.
Do you remember what year? What year was the that thing that
Wasn't it
happened?
2011?
Yes, the
2011?
reason
Yeah.
why I asked is I was visiting here.
Okay.
I can't remember the year, but I was just visiting. I wasn't actually here already. And my mom, they saw it on the news, obviously. And of course, she calls and she's like, in her very Caribbean voice, "Oh my God, I see the thing going on in the news where y'all." And I'm like trying to explain to her, we're not
Yeah.
in Oslo. We're in a different
Yeah.
area. It's like
Yeah.
a good, 4 to 8 hour drive away from where we're at,
I can tell you that was a strange, strange day. That was a really weird and nerve wracking thing to see unfolding on the news like that.
Yeah.
And, I don't live in Oslo, but Oslo's not that far away. And it's like, okay, is this, my first thought was this is some sort of organization or group
Right. Right.
that's doing this. I never thought it was only one person. And, yeah, it was it.
Yeah.
And it threw me back to, I can remember when 9/11 hit. I was off that day. I was a police officer at the time. I was off that day. I ended up getting called in, but I saw all that happening, unfolding on the news, and just that weird feeling of vulnerability. But actually, I felt even more exposed and more vulnerable here in 2011 because
Oh, wow.
I all respect to the Norwegian police officers out there, but I don't trust their readiness to handle catastrophe and disaster because there's no funding. There's not enough of them, and there's no funding for it. I don't know. I don't know what changes have been made since 2011, but I remember at that time, I'm like, oh boy, oh shit, here we go now.
Yeah.
I was thinking it was going to be a
has,
much broader attack from some sort of organization.
Yeah. I think that has to do also with there's no such thing as a utopian society, but
No.
as a utopian society would be, Norway's in that bubble.
Yes.
So for them, those kind of things that we're used to turning on the news and wherever you're from in the United States is kind of like par for the course for us. And you just kind of have this very anesthetized kind of approach and reaction to it versus here in Norway. I think it really took a lot of people back. And it did. Of course,
it did. Absolutely.
I don't want to say it that way, but he really understood what the response would not be.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
And which is I guess a bad thing, but I'm sure things have changed since then.
Yeah, I'm sure they've tightened up security. I'm sure they've gotten them, they're in a better state of readiness and preparedness now. But at the time, I felt vulnerable. I felt very exposed.
Yeah. What I thought was there was a couple days before that thing actually happened. This is how surreal this is. Norway, as you know, is one of the places where you could leave your backpack at a bus stop and come back tomorrow and go, oh, snap, honey, I forgot my backpack at the bus stop. And it's literally still sitting there.
Yeah.
That will never happen in New York City.
No.
Never. Especially not in Brooklyn. Maybe in New York City now, if that backpack you would have to go to a police station to get it because they're going to be like, why did you leave the backpack there? And it'll be a whole different response. But anyway, some kids were coming in. My wife and I were going shopping. Some kids were coming into the supermarket here in Norway, Kiwi again. And as with most of the kids coming from school, they dropped their backpacks at the front door inside of the store. And this was the first time I'd actually seen it. So my response was very Brooklyn kid, born and raised in New York City in the 80s when that was, literally shootouts in the middle of the street and those kind of things. And I was like, hey, pick your backpack up. And my wife is like, hey, relax. This is Norway. That stuff doesn't happen. I said, oh, yeah? I said, you never know. You never know if one of these days somebody gets the idea to put a bomb in their backpack and put it in. This was literally 2 to 3 days before that incident happened. Yeah. And I said to myself, I said, oh my God, I kind of put a bad omen on.
It's all your fault. It's all your fault.
I think that has to do with being from a place like New York. And of course you are semi a product of your environment.
Sure.
Like when I first came here and then we were at Nagon and we're very much like Michael Moore, Canada. Doors open, people just walk in and I was locking the doors, as soon as I walked in the house. And then one time her niece and nephew came by and they're like, why are you guys locking the door? The only time mommy and daddy lock the door is when they're
Yeah.
and my wife had to explain to them that, like, well, Uncle Dwayne is from New York, and it's not kind of like that in New York City.
Well, I still go round and round with Snoopy. Now she's more in line with me now when it comes to security and knocking doors and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But still, I still kind of, I don't know. I'm on my toes. I guess I can't lose that awareness.
No.
However, having said that, at our place that we have up in Finnmark, up on Silent,
Mm-hmm.
there's no talk about locking the door
Of
up
course,
there. I mean,
yeah.
we have people who come, they don't even knock. They just come in,
yeah.
11:30, 12 at night and sit down and start talking, and we have a cup of coffee. But that's the way it is up there. That's an extreme situation. But down here, I can't get in line with Norway being this utopia that a lot of people think it is. I lock my door at night. I have my alarm system with with video coverage and all that stuff. I mean, that's just me. I guess I've seen too much. Much. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, of course, where we were at, as opposed to say in Oslo, the big city, or even Bergen, the big city, is a change of pace.
Sure.
But a couple of years back, I was working in Oslo with the company where we transferred there for a couple of days to work with some of the guys that had an overload of work. And I looked around and I'm like, you know what Oslo reminds me of? I saw like drug addicts on the street. I'm like, this is like New York City in 1980s when everybody was running around with all the crackheads and, and I just was like, my wife, her and I were talking on the phone. I was like, what's up with you guys? This is like the 20th.
I don't know what it's like now, but Oslo was known for a while as the worst city for heroin in Europe at one point. I don't know what it's like now, but at one point that's where it was.
Yeah, I don't know, but what I was surprised at was the amount of, I want to say this in a way that doesn't come across as any sort of bigotry. The amount of non-ethnic Norwegian that were addicted to drugs in Oslo.
Yeah.
I saw a lot of Africans, and I'm thinking, and I said to my wife, I'm like, where are they getting the money from if they're on NOV money? Very Norwegian minded when I said that, but she was like, and I'm like, I don't understand how somebody could come from a culture where drugs is not really a big to do, except for those countries that probably the guys chew the khat.
Somalia, Somalia and Kenya,
and I just, in my head, I was like, I couldn't wrap my head around how could I go from being a flykting or a refugee in Norway and then partake in drugs where I'm running from something bad. Why would I want to run to something that's going to make me worse off?
I have an answer for that. There's two things. One is a lot of these people are coming from trauma, serious emotional, physical, mental trauma, and they're not getting the type of help that they need. Okay. So they're finding relief in the drugs. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. Another thing is, now I'm gonna get all my Nigerian brothers mad at me, but there's a lot of West Africans in general who are really, if not running the drug trade in Oslo, they're very influential in the drug trade. And it's a strange phenomenon, but a lot of them who used to be dealers started getting high on their own supply. And now they're the hypes that you see stumbling around in the streets.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting development there. Yeah. Don't ask me how I know that. Don't ask me how I know all this.
No, I'm not.
Let's just go with it.
You know what I'm going to chalk it up to? It's the police background. But just as we were talking earlier with the whole kind of sense of, awareness.
Yeah.
I don't do it as much, but I still find myself kind of, if my wife and I go to, say, of course, we can't really do that now, but if we went to a restaurant or bar, the sitting where I'm facing the people coming in, looking for all of the exits, kind of being aware of the people around me.
For sure.
Or even shopping sometimes, I still kind of
sure.
Hey, you see that guy in aisle number 3 where he was kind of, and she's like, no, I didn't see that guy. And I'm just thinking like, is it me? Or is it the military / New Yorker in me?
It's all of those things. I still do that. I still do that. My head's on a swivel all the time when I'm out, and I have to sit. I have to be able to watch the door.
Yeah.
Have my back up against something and watch it. I just can't get rid of that. It's the police, military. I just can't drop that way of thinking. I can't do
Right.
it.
Right.
But
Yeah.
let me ask you something, Dwayne.
Mhm.
Your life in New York City. Okay, first of all, New York City scares the shit out of me. I'll just say that.
Wait a minute. How could you have been a police officer and New York City scared you?
Remember though, I'm from small town, rural country, cows and corn, Ohio. That's where I'm from.
Okay.
That's where I'm born and raised. And then from that I went to college, but again it was at Ohio University, which is way
Mm-hmm.
out in the sticks. And then from there, U.S. Marines, which was an awakening. It was a period of maturing for me, but it was still a isolated type of thing. So to go from all of that and then into Chicago again, it was real foreign to me. It really
Mm-hmm.
was. And before I was a police officer, when I was done in the Marines, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I needed to get my head straight. I needed to figure out what I
Right.
wanted to do
Right.
with my life. So I took a job as a truck driver. I drove for Schneider National. You probably remember
Okay.
seeing their
Yeah.
trucks, those
Yeah.
orange trucks all over the place. And
Yeah.
I drove all over the United States. I drove several times into New York City to drop off stuff.
Okay.
And again, this is pre-Chicago, pre my time in the Chicago. I'm basically a country dude from Ohio, and here I
Mm-hmm.
am, right smack in the middle of New York City, with a
Yeah.
53-foot trailer,
Yeah.
dealing with that, just dealing with that. And to me, it's scary. It seems like that city is alive and breathing, with its claws
Oh
out.
yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah.
So to live there is, and when I lived in Chicago, it was in the south suburbs. I wasn't right smack in the middle of the city. I was,
Okay.
I did my job out on the streets, running and gunning, chasing down, all that stuff. But when I went home, it was in a real
Kind
safe
of.
and
Yeah.
quiet neighborhood in the south suburbs, right?
Yep.
With
Mm-hmm.
5 or 6 other cops, within the block.
Right.
Different experience, right? So New York, how do you do it? How does one? I'm trying to formulate my question here. How can you realize your true self when you are pressed in to such a large amount of people?
Mm-hmm.
You're pressed into so many things happening, and not necessarily the violence, but just things happening. And you're pressed into where everything is so centralized. My impression of New York is that you don't have to go out of your neighborhood. You've got your stores, you've got sometimes your job,
Right.
and everything is right there. What's that like?
Well, I think probably pre-military and a little bit post-military.
You
I
were
think
U.S. Army, right?
yes, I
Yeah,
was in the
yeah.
army for 10 years, from 87 to 95. Um, there's a part of me that wish I was still in.
I still,
If I had,
I
yeah, if
wish
I
I would
had
have
one job
stayed.
that I'd do again and again, that would be the job.
I wish I never would have got out of the U.S. Marines. I
Yeah,
wish I would have
yeah.
stayed in. Oh, anyway,
But
yeah,
as a New Yorker, I still take that New York with me. I have to say, over the years being here in Norway, I've become a lot. When I say softer, I don't mean like softer, like but I mean softer in the sense that there's not always that heightened sense of awareness where you have to kind of be on a swivel. Of course, it's still with you. Um, I think New York is a very strange animal in a sense
yeah,
that you do have, like you said, the neighborhood stores where you don't really need to leave the neighborhood. I think even to this day, I probably know guys that are have never left New York
yeah,
City.
yeah,
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 and I think that's very weird for a lot of people, and it's also that kind of black humor where you have that one guy like, yo, to this day, I still don't know his government. We still call him Pookie. I have people that I know like
yeah,
that, where that is
yeah,
so strange for other
yeah,
people in other communities or other parts of the world. Um, so I think New Yorkers will always be New Yorkers no matter where they go. You kind of take that, like you said, that pressure of the New York pressure cooker.
yeah.
But I think there are times when I go home now to New York, obviously not during COVID, but the times that we've gone home where I'm like longing to come back to Norway. But then as soon as I get back to Norway, I'm like the duck on a pond. My feet are just kind of going
Yeah.
underneath.
Yeah.
Nobody
Yeah.
sees that, and that's
Yeah.
the New Yorker in me, because you're looking
Right.
for that restlessness, that
Right.
kind of hustle and bustle, and all of those things that are very New York.
Well,
But I guess to answer your question is, it's it's a love-hate relationship. I love it because I'm a New Yorker at heart. I hate it when I go back because now I'm sort of a Norwegian,
yeah. You're
and
soft. You're soft.
yeah, I'm getting soft. And it does sometimes when I go home. I get the, oh, he's not from around, and he must be 5'0".
Ah,
Police officer. When I'm going, whoa, 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 I grew up, born and raised here. What are you talking about?
right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what was your neighborhood like? Was it a good place to be?
Our block was very family oriented. Most of the people that still live, with the exception of what is happening in New York City and most of the kind of inner cities, the gentrification is still a lot of the people that were homeowners still own there. But I grew up in New York City in the 80s, and I'm always nostalgic when I watch kind of what I call the 90s
Yes.
hip hop,
Yeah. Yeah.
boys in the hood kind of
Yeah.
movies, and how nostalgic it is, but how real it is, surreal and real, to where I grew up in a time when you did go to park and you saw crack vials
Yeah.
on the floor, on the ground,
Yeah.
or there were shootouts. So you went to what we New Yorkers refer to as a block party, which is like a neighborhood party
Yeah.
that they close up the street, and
Yeah.
you have, and there were the one guy at the end of the night that, like, we already know how this is going to end. There's going to be a shot in the air, and that didn't happen all the time. But of course, I mean, and my wife and myself, our upbringing is so diametrically opposed that it's often funny that we are a couple, and in the sense that I'll say things like, hey, you remember on a Saturday morning when they used to have the kung
Yeah.
fu theater? And she's like, what? We had one
Yeah.
channel, everybody watched that same channel.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
hey, you remember on 42nd Street back in the days when they used to have the peep shows next to the 3 for $5 kung fu movie? And she's like, I don't know where you grew up at, but they didn't have that
Yeah.
here in
Yeah.
Aegon.
No, it's I know what you mean. Now, my wife and I, we grew up actually quite similar. She grew up in rural Norway. I grew up in rural Ohio, and there's a lot of similarities there. But we were watching TV or watching YouTube the other day. I'd casting a YouTube up onto the TV, and we were watching videos from the 80s.
Okay. Yeah.
Videos that were normal for us to see on MTV. And she's like, "Oh, I didn't know they had a video for that." You know, like old Duran Duran songs, or White Snake. You know, those big popular MTV videos like that. And she's like, "Oh, I never knew. This is just yesterday we were doing that." So it's continuous. It's a continuous realization that our childhoods, that our backgrounds in general can be drastically different. But that's what makes it kind of cool to be here in Norway, because we do have different reference points than most Norwegians have here. Yeah. But what was your neighborhood called? What neighborhood was it?
I grew up in Bushwick, Brooklyn.
Bushwick.
Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of, now may he rest in peace.
Are you going to say Bushwick Bill?
Yes, he's actually.
I have a story to tell.
Yeah, I'm just going to say this real quick.
Okay.
Literally, I went to the Catholic school across from the public school where Bushwick Bill actually went to. And so a couple of years back, we're going way back, my then ex-wife, girlfriend at the time, we were in a PX, the Post Exchange, and we were buying a CD. And this is, I think, when Ghetto Boys came out with their first CD. And in very Bushwick, Brooklyn, city kid fashion, yo, Janet, I know this MFer, while a colonel was coming down the aisle. Excuse me, sir. Yeah.
Well, now what year was that?
Oh, wow. This is probably in the early 90s, because I was in Germany at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I have to, now I'm going to be careful here, because I don't want to have to engage a lawyer. But I want to say it was in 98 or 99.
Mm-hmm.
I met
Okay.
in the Chicago area.
Mm-hmm.
And I for 72 hours.
Wink, wink. Yeah, I got you.
Wink, wink.
Yeah.
And I'll have to tell you this off of the microphone because it's an interesting story and it's funny as hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
But let's just say that, yeah, with him, to know him quite well. And in the end, we parted ways, not quite as friends, but we parted ways after hours.
I got you. As you said, growing up in kind of, I guess you could say rural Ohio, I had a roommate when I was stationed in Fort Carson, Colorado. His name was, he's Thompson. Anybody could be Thompson, so I'll just say his name. So Thompson was a white guy from, in his mind, Chicago. And so in my mind, I was like, well, where in Chicago are you from? Oh, I'm from a little bit outside of Chicago. Well, where in Chicago? He was from Hammond, Indiana.
Hammond, Indiana, yes.
Indiana.
Yeah.
And I used to always, like in my very kind of sarcastic way, every time I would see him, like, Thompson, a white guy from Chicago, Hammond, Indiana, a suburb of Chicago. Because I couldn't wrap my head around, like, I've never been to Chicago, but in my mind, I was like, for me, Chicago was all the stuff I heard from guys I met in the military, or I grew up in Cabrini Green, or if it was a Spanish guy, I grew up in this part of Chicago. If it was a Polish or Irish guy, I grew up in this part of Chicago. And I couldn't wrap my head around, you're from Hammond, Indiana? How are you from Chicago?
Well, it's Hammond is, even though it's across the state line, but it is right on the border with, I do believe, a little tiny bit of Chicago actually touches Hammond. And then there's two other suburbs that there's like a thin strip of land between the actual city of Chicago and Hammond. But Hammond is considered part of the metro Chicago area. It is.
Yeah,
and
okay.
Hammond has Chicago problems when it comes to crime, when it comes to drug activity and everything. Yeah. In fact, I have an American friend who lives here in Norway who's from Hammond, a white lady, and I call her Ghetto Child all the time.
Oh,
because Hammond really is... I don't want to say it's a dump, but let's just say that Hammond has inner city Chicago problems because of its proximity to Chicago. A lot of the guns that are on the streets in Chicago come from Hammond.
Okay.
Because Indiana has some really lax
of Chicago.
I'm sorry?
Shameless, the TV series Shameless?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I kind of got it.
Yeah. So Indiana has some really lax gun laws when you compare with the laws that are in Chicago and Illinois. So, it's literally 2 steps away from Hammond to Chicago. So the guns are just coming right across the state line like that and right into Chicago. Yeah. Hammond, wow. Yeah. Been there, done that.
Yeah. Yeah, but like what we were talking about earlier, I as far as being I've had this conversation with several people, and I think I've never really openly had the conversation because I always find that I didn't want to have the pushback from our white counterparts that are Americans living in Norway. Yeah. But I often said to myself, I think that our kind of being Black Americans or African Americans in Norway is kind of it's very similar because, of course, we all have the American culture, but then there's those differences and nuances that come with being a Black American in a predominantly white country, if you will, and how different our experiences, while very similar, how different it is. Where a good example is you're at a confirmation or a wedding and you look around and you're going, the only thing darker than me in here is all of the Norwegians with the traditional black and white suit. Right.
Absolutely. I'm probably more used to that than you are for a couple of reasons. One, that I've been here longer, but also because where I grew up, like I said, way out in the country. I mean, I was literally that black spot in the crowd. So I grew up like that. Yeah. But I think most of our fellow white American expats here in Norway realize that things are different for us. I think they know that. They seem to be a fairly open-minded and progressive group of people. I think most of the pushback comes from Norwegians themselves. Oh. At least for me, anyway. When I've become more vocal the last year about what I see happening both back home and in Norway when it comes to social issues. and a little bit of politics, but mostly social issues. I've been a lot more vocal about that. And the pushback I get seems to be from mostly Norwegians.
Huh.
The American expats are right in line. I don't want to say in line. They tend to agree with the points that I bring up and the statements that I make, but the pushback is coming from Norwegians.
Yeah, I don't really get the pushback from Norwegians because what I get, especially with the job that I do, there are a lot of younger guys. Because one of the first, I don't think it was the George Floyd. It might have been when the George Floyd thing first initially happened. I had one of the guys that I work with. He's like 28ish. So, and he asked me, he goes, so let me ask you a question. Like, how you growing up in New York or in the States, how was your interaction with police officers as a Black person, and what did you feel about what happened with the George Floyd or things that have happened in the States? There was a part of me that found that very interesting because I said to myself, wow, most of these people that you would think are kind of live in this bubble are very aware of what's going on in the States, especially.
Yeah.
And we had, I to be honest with you, I gave him the very Obama politically correct kind of a diplomatic answer, but he kind of saw there was more to it, and he was like, "No, well, what do you really think?" And I said, "For me personally, I've never had a per se bad interaction with police officers, but I do understand that how I think about things that I don't think that my white counterparts have to think about when leaving out of the door."
Yeah.
And a good example to that is we going back a little while. My wife and I were dating, and I was in New York. I was working for a company that did contracting. So say you and your wife bought a TV at Target, and you go, "Hey, do you guys have any guys that would come out and install a TV for us?" The company I worked for did things like that. So this particular day, I was going to set up a surround sound system for a lady who worked for the Italian consulate in New York City. So I went to her apartment, which was on Madison Avenue. But it was a Friday, so I didn't feel like doing the typical, shirt and tie kind of thing. So I kind of went a little bit casual. I had jeans on, but I said to my wife, now girlfriend then, I said, yeah, I think I'm just going to wear like, even though I'm going to wear jeans and like casual shoes, I think I'm just still going to put on like a shirt and a tie and a vest. And then I put on a black Kangol hat. And she was like, why are you wearing a shirt and tie if it's a Friday and it's dressed down? I'm like, yeah, but the lady who works for the Italian consulate. And then, it's Madison Avenue. But what I was really saying was, babe, I'm going to be a Black dude going into a nice posh apartment complex in Manhattan.
See, and those are the things we have to think
jeans,
about.
I still got I can't have the True Religion jeans on. I have to have the non-threatening jeans on and a non-threatening look.
Right.
And even with all of that, when I first walked in the building, before I could even get up to the concierge desk, the guy kind of literally, as soon as I walked in the door, was like, "Can I help you?" And I'm thinking like, okay, I got a very, non-threatening tool bag, which is all enclosed, so there was no exposed tools. Yeah. And even the way I dressed, it was still kind of help you.
Right.
Whereas I thought, had I been maybe a different individual, would I have made it to the counter before he kind of did the stop? I need the, password before you come further.
Right.
And she, even to this day, there's times when she doesn't understand my kind of responses to those things.
It used to be that my wife didn't understand those things. And then because she's a stubborn, bullheaded, Samisk Norwegian woman, she would argue with me, try and destroy my argument for what I was for what I was saying. But now she's come around. Now she's seen enough of these things happen to me and how people's attitudes change from when they're dealing with her to when they're dealing with me.
Right.
Now she's seen it and she's on board with that. But have you experienced things like that here in Norway?
Sometimes, of course, we get the typical when, say, her and I are going shopping and we're standing in line together. And of course, you're standing in line together. And, I'll get what I call the still teenage me kind of items like, ooh, and I'll put those things on the counter. And then, and then we're standing in line together. And you can clearly kind of get the body language interaction that we're together, but there's still are you guys together? kind of
Yeah, yeah.
conversation.
We've gotten that too, and I've asked my Snoopy. I said, "What do I got to do? Do I have to put my hand on your ass or something before they
Yeah,
understand that we're together?" It's or how about this? I don't know how if you've experienced this, but I've actually, I don't know. I might go into talking with a receptionist at the hospital, for example,
mm-hmm.
and I'm speaking, several sentences. I might be telling her my name, asking her where I need to go, and things like that. And then before she answers, she'll preface that with, "Do you speak Norwegian?" And it's like, are you that used to not, or are your expectations that low that you can't even register that I've spoken Norwegian to you in at least a couple sentences here? But that's what they'll
No,
start with.
I usually get. I'll speak Norwegian, and then once they hear the little kind of round round like
Uh-huh.
typical American, they'll start speaking in English.
Yeah.
But I think it's more of
That might be a politeness thing. They're trying
yeah,
to
I think
make it
it's more of a
easier.
politeness thing. Like, oh, it's not that that I sound like I'm struggling with the language. It's more he speaks English, so I'll just speak English. It's probably going to be easier. But I've the only times I get the kind of, I would say, if you will, pushback on the language is if my wife says something, and I don't know if this is your experience, or a Norwegian says something, they mumble a lot when they speak
Yes.
Norwegian.
Yeah.
So they do what I call the New York thing. So how's it going? How is it going? It's kind of smushed into
Right.
one big word.
Yeah. Yeah.
Forget about it. And so
Right.
Norwegians do that when they speak. But if you are, even as long as you or myself has been here, if someone's speaking, you're not paying attention, you'll be like, huh? And then they make the assumption that you didn't understand what they said, and they
Yes.
automatically start speaking English.
Oh
No, no, no.
gosh. Yeah.
It's not that I didn't understand what you said. I just didn't hear what you said. So can
Exactly.
you repeat that?
I'm hard of hearing. I have hearing problems, so I'm quite often I have to, huh, or can you repeat that? And then yes, people will just assume that I don't know what the heck they're
The
saying.
language, yeah.
And it's tiring. I guess, I mean, I almost said I understand it. I don't. I don't understand it. I would think that. I mean, back home, I don't preface a conversation by asking an Asian person or someone who is Latin American. I don't preface that by asking them if they speak English. I just talk,
Right.
and
right.
we'll figure it out whether or not they understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And they don't seem to be doing that very often here in Norway.
No,
They make that
and,
assumption
yeah.
that you don't know what they're saying.
Yeah. And then especially with the States, I think we are, and of course, both being military, you probably had a guy that was in your unit that had a very Asian last name, like Nguyen, or a Spanish guy that had a last name like, Soto or Rosales.
I had I had a Soto in boot camp who was from
Yeah.
Puerto Rico and didn't speak a lick of English.
But so we're so used to kind of seeing people of different
Yeah.
hues that kind of make up America.
Right,
Whereas
right.
I think for Norwegians, it's like, okay, anybody that isn't the typical blonde hair, blue eyed.
Yeah, but how long is it going to be like that? How long is it going to be like that? People say, well, it's only been such a short time that we've had immigrants here in Norway. Short time, relatively maybe, but we're talking 40, 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not really that short of a time. So what is there that remains for them to get used to? I don't,
What I think is going to start happening is what I see happening now. When you and I were growing up, the mailman, the police officer, the firefighter was your typical all-American white guy.
Yeah.
Those kind of civil service jobs, as you see the change, the older Norwegians that are retiring from those jobs, like bus driver, the streetcar driver, the mailman, you're starting to see, as you're probably when you and the wife maybe go into Oslo, or same like myself, you go, oh, hey, black bus driver,
right,
so you're starting to see that.
True.
I think when you start to see those more,
they'll catch
you
up.
will see kind of like okay, as those kind of, and of course it will still take at some point the corporate Norway, or what we consider, like, say for instance in New York City, it's not uncommon to turn on the news and see a black newscaster or someone of that hue, whereas here it's still kind of like, with the exception of of a few, and that's mostly females, uh, then it will kind of become a little more commonplace.
You're talking about it's mostly female immigrants or females of non-traditional Norwegian in the news media.
Right.
That's interesting that you say that, because I also have the impression, a very solid impression, that first of all, there aren't very many people of color or of non-ethnic Norwegian background in the news media here in Norway, and that those that are there, the majority of them are women. But I had Lisa Cooper on. Do you know who Lisa Cooper is? Yeah, she's a Black American woman. She's been here since 1989, I think. She was the former chair of Democrats Abroad Norway. So she's been here in Norway for a long time. She's very active politically. She's been on the news a lot. And I had her on my podcast a few days back, and I told Lisa, we were talking about this very thing, and I said that most of the people of color that are in the news media are women. I don't see. I came up with two men of color. There's that Asian gentleman with the Asian background who has that debate program on NRK. I cannot remember what his name is.
Yeah, I don't know his name, but I've seen him.
Yeah, and there is I believe he is. I want to say has a Sri Lankan background, who is a correspondent for. Is it for NRK or is it TV2? Yeah, and those are the only two men of color that I was able to think of. But I rattled off quite a few women. But she says no, the women are in the minority. It's more men. Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it like that. I really don't.
No, I can't think of the young lady's name. There's two. There's the young lady from Good Morning Norga. I think her name is Desta.
Desta?
With the Eritrean background.
I got to be on her show. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's right.
Last summer. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other young lady is, I think she's married to a Norwegian, and I don't know if she's Indian or Sri Lankan, so I don't want to offend her. Yeah. But in my opinion, very attractive. I love her complexion. Don't tell the wife. She does sports. I think she does sporting events.
Yes. What is her name?
I have no idea what her name is, but I was like, every time I see her, I'm like, man, it's like, I have my grown-ups moment, grown-ups 2 moment. Oh my, look at this. What does that mean? I don't know, but it sounds good.
It sounds good. Yeah. Well, you also have Rima Iraki on NRK. She's the one that interviewed me a couple weeks ago.
Okay. At
the 7:00 sending. Rima Iraki, look her up. She's very professional, attractive. So I think, but besides them, I can rattle off a handful of women, but I only come up with those 2 men. So I don't know. I put the challenge to Lisa Cooper. I said, next time we talk, we're going to have some names. We're going to put it together, because I don't think there are that many men.
Yeah. But yeah, to answer your question, I think that was when it sort of kind of changed, when we start to see the Black or Sri Lankan police officer, which there are some. I've seen
there's some, yeah.
But or the Black firefighter, or the Chilean Norwegian firefighter, where those kind of individuals. As we see those more and more, then I think it will start to kind of
be normalized eventually.
It'll be normalized, where we can't make the assumption that this person doesn't speak Norwegian if he's wearing a police officer's uniform. That kind of would not be a thing.
So you have a crush on that sports.
I can't remember her name, but
she's TV2, right?
I think I don't know if it's NRK or TV2, but
I got to look this up. I'm going to look this up real quick. Let's see. Actually, I think it's NRK. NRK.
She does the sports, and I want to say winter sports.
NRK Sports on Kid. Just running through the pictures that they have of their different sports anchors, and I do not see a woman of color. So let me change it to TV2. I just want to know who you're crushing on now. Let's see. Sports on Kid. Dama. There she is. Yes. Siri Avlesen Österli. Can you see?
You got it.
Uh,
Oh man.
want me to hook you up? I know
You want to
people.
get me
I
killed
know
for the
people.
what?
And I tell you, the day they invent a time machine, she will never see me again because I'm going back to 1974 and I'm hooking up with Joni Mitchell.
Okay.
I told her
Wow.
it's done. Sorry, Snoop, I love you. But what's keeping us together is the lack of a time machine. I told her that.
Yeah. I think my two probably, if you will, older lady crushes would be Angela Bassett and Helen Mirren. Those are my two like
Oh,
older lady
Helen Mirren, of
crushes.
course. Yeah.
Yeah, those are
Yeah.
my My kind of young lady crushes are Alicia Keys and Rihanna.
Oh, Rihanna?
Yeah.
I can't get past that forehead, man.
You know what I think it is? I
I
think for
can't
me
do it.
it's the correct Caribbean girl thing.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think maybe that's what it is.
She's what, Barbados, right?
She's from Barbados,
Barbados,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
And I hear that when she talks, I'm like,
Oh
oh
yeah,
my
yeah.
God.
You hear
Yeah.
I love hearing her speak. I don't like
Yeah.
her. I don't like hearing her sing, but I love to hear her speak. It's attractive. She's
I
got an
don't think it's
attractive
so much the
voice.
singing; it's the look and the accent.
No, I can't get past that forehead, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can't do it.
Yeah, I got you. I got you.
Oh man. No. Okay. So yeah, Siri Avlesen Österli. That's her.
You got it.
And I remember when she first came on, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Because it stands out. You know, there just aren't
Yeah.
that many people of color that are in the news media. And I don't know how, but I'd like to do something about that. I'm trying to be vocal about that.
And I think what we're finding is there is kind of a mix. I think what's happening now is when I first got here, it seemed to be like a lot of the immigrants were, going into the trades.
Yes.
But as with the company I work, we do a lot of installations for schools, universities, offices, and I'm starting to see that kind of transition to more professional jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do see there's a black guy on
Well,
the
yeah.
IT
Yeah.
department.
Well, you know
like
what I
that kind
noticed the other day. You know these construction workers or maybe electricians and stuff. They always wear the yellow and orange fluorescent. Almost like a I mean, it's a jacket in the pants, but it matches. It almost looks like a bodysuit. And 2-3 days ago, Snoopy and I are out in Drummond, and we saw an African wearing that, and it's like, okay, but that's just not typically the kind of work that we see them doing. So it's a sign of the times. It's a sign of the changing times that we're starting to see. And as you say, the bus driver is very often black or brown. We're starting to spread out into different areas of work, and it's a good thing to see. But I long for the day where it's not. I don't have that reaction like, oh wow,
like an anomaly, if you will.
Yeah. And like I say, I'm trying to be more vocal. I don't know how I can be of any influence, but I'm trying to be vocal about the lack of black and brown or immigrant representation in the news media in Norway. I'm trying to do something, bring up some awareness about that.
However, what I've seen since I've been here, and again, this is as you said, sign of the times. If you look at the commercials, they've actually changed.
Yes.
There was a time when I turned on a TV and it was just Norwegian teenagers, Norwegian people. Now you will see if you will, interracial couple.
Yeah.
It's usually
a lot.
African guy or black guy and a Norwegian girl.
Yes.
Or I've seen the vice versa. There's one commercial where I think it's for the gum, and then the guy's dancing, and it's the young lady. Yeah. She's black and he's white and he's kind of pulling her in. Yeah. So I'm starting to see that, and you see the mix in a lot of the commercials, especially when it's kind of geared towards younger people, where you're starting, say a Coca-Cola commercial, you're starting to see that there's this, you could see that all of these kids are in high school or in college and they're all together.
And it's been creeping in over some years, but I think the last 18 months, there's been a real influx of those types of commercials showing biracial people or biracial couples or sometimes totally black families where everybody is. And it seems to be really taken off over the last 12 to 18 months here in Norway. Yeah. It's interesting.
Yeah, because there's one particular commercial. I think it's for Telenor. And then they have where the families are walking down the street. And then first you see there's for you don't see the husband initially. You see the wife, and she's walking down the street with the kids who are apparently clearly mixed. And then the guy comes behind. It's like this big dude. I mean, he's like, you got to see that commercial. It's
Yeah, I haven't seen that one.
The mascot of the commercial is like a puppet. This older Norwegian guy with long blonde hair, kind of older, with a shag kind of beard, and
Yeah.
yeah, and it's like the guy's like very imposingly big.
I haven't seen that one. I haven't seen that one.
So there are, as you said, there are those things that you're starting to see. But as I think you see that more, there will be less of this for our non-Norwegian speaking listeners. Kan du snakke norsk?
Yeah,
can you speak English?
Yeah,
Can you speak Norwegian?
It's going to take time, I guess. Like I said, I've been here 19 years, and I've seen the changes. And I don't know, maybe I'm getting impatient. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But Norway changed a lot from when I came in 2002 to the time when you came. That period also was a big change.
Oh yeah.
So you didn't see some of the. Yeah, you just haven't seen some of the dynamic that I've seen because you've been here a shorter amount of time.
There's a gentleman that I know. He's from New York also, older gentleman. He's been here 20 plus years. He and the wife are divorced, but he said he stayed because of the back and forth with the children. It would be harder to kind of come and go.
Yeah.
And he said, he always talks about, I came at a time where literally I was like the only spot on a domino, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. Do I know him?
You probably do. I'm not sure if it's okay to mention his name.
Sure.
His name is Joseph Kendall. He goes by Jose. Very, very kind of stern, square-jawed
I do
individual.
believe I've hooked up with him on social media. Yeah. And we aren't that many. We aren't that many, so we tend to know each other.
He was one of the first individuals that I met, and I have another friend of mine who lives in Trondheim. His name is Ryan Bethea, former NFL football player. He lived in Bergen for quite some time, a member of the Bergen Storm football team, American football team.
Yeah.
And so those were literally the first two African Americans that I met in Norway. And I literally thought I would be like a island onto myself. So it was kind of, as time went on, I was like,
yeah. No, I know what you mean. We are not that many here in Norway at all, but we seem to have grouped on social media. It's not all, we're kind of spread to all four corners of the country, but we at least have that connection. We can share some humor and share some experiences on social media.
Yeah.
And I'm on a mission now. I'm going to start plucking us up one at a time and having us on the podcast and let all the different Black Americans share their experiences here.
And again, this is not to discount our white American counterparts or Latin American, Asian American counterparts. It's just that
it's different for us.
I just want people to understand it's not that we're wanting to divest ourselves from other individuals or other groups. It's just that I think what you find with us, you can't just blend into the mix of things, because you will always stand out, and it has to do with the color of your skin. And it's not to make that the color is as important as the individual, but a good person that we both know, I won't say his name, but he is the administrator of Americans in Norway. He will never not have to be questioned as to who he is.
Right.
And he very much understands that.
Yeah.
And he's very, empathetic and sympathetic to those types of plights. So I think it's just to say that, like, I wouldn't want our non-Black counterparts to feel, hey, what about me? I might chop liver here. It's just
I think they understand, and a lot of them, a majority of my podcast guests have been from that pool of people. Mm-hmm. So they know they have a voice here on my podcast, but I think they also know that it is things are a little bit different for us, those of us with another skin color. Like you say, we stand out. No matter what we say or do, we stand out, and there's always that at least a microsecond of prejudgment that we have to work through. Yeah. It's always there.
Yeah, because a good example, and this is probably where I'll just end on that note as far as that conversation is, a couple of years back, I was shopping in Coop's, another like kind of our version in Norway of a Sam's wholesale, if you will, for our American people listening to the podcast abroad or back in the States, if you will. So it was around Christmas time. As you know yourself, there are very specific Christmas Norwegian delicacies.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you're shopping for those items, and especially for my wife always giving me the honeydew list that I call, this is something you should be shopping for because you're the Norwegian.
Right.
And as the guy is like, scanning the items, you could see kind of, it went from like this boop, 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 very quick kind of scan to boop, boop, kind of like every now and again looking up at me. And there were items like Christmas sausages.
Yeah.
That white Christmas sausage.
They are very Norwegian. That is a very Norwegian food item for Christmas.
The red beet salad, the thin ribba, the ribs that are cooked at Christmas time. And he just kind of looked up, and I said to the Norwegian, I'm going to answer that question mark over your head now. I said, my wife's Norwegian. And he was like, oh, okay. I was just trying to figure out.
That is so funny. Yeah. That should be a comedy sketch right there. Yeah. That is funny, man.
Yeah.
No, and again, like I said before, I say it a lot. I don't mind the curiosity. Something like that would just tickle me to death, and that opens the door to a conversation. Which, I mean, that's why I do this podcast. I love those kind of conversations. So, I don't know. The day will come eventually where maybe my kids will see a Norway where it's not an anomaly.
Yeah.
For us to be walking out and about and having certain jobs and certain positions in society. I don't know. Maybe it's going to take longer than that. I'm impatient.
But however, I do see in the medical field, I see a lot of course, they're African, but I do see a lot of African doctors.
Yeah.
One of my...
A lot of Nigerian, especially.
Right. One of my Norwegian social studies classmates was a doctor, which I was very impressed. I was like, I've literally never met, other than you being on the other side of the table, I've never met for lack of better terms, I never met a black doctor.
Yeah.
And it was like very impressive to me that this guy is literally from Africa and he's a doctor. Like,
and again, wouldn't it be nice to get to the point where that is nothing special, where it's common? Yeah. Wow. I don't know. I'm going to ask you again. Do you want me to make a phone call to Siri Avlysen Östli? I know people. Your wife is going to hate me. Your wife is going to hate me.
Listen, if she had it her way, it would be a toss-up between Denzel. I don't remember his name, but he was on a show called The Unit. He played the president in 24, the series. Dennis Haysbert is his name, I think.
Yeah.
And for some strange reason, what is his name? Forrest Whitaker.
Come on, really?
Reason, that's like her. That's
Forrest
like her,
Whitaker.
Yeah, that's her three top. And
if you put some dark shades on him, maybe. But that
I know. Well, that's another story. and then
Forrest Whitaker.
Right, and her two, I would say, white crushes is Colin Firth.
Really?
And of course, our dearly departed James Bond for me, Sean Connery. Yeah.
That is a cool dude. I'd go out on a date with Sean Connery. He was that dude was so cool. Oh man. I miss him. I miss Sean Connery.
I mean, there are others, of course. There's Morris Chestnut. There's the guy that plays the staff sergeant in a TV series called The Rookie.
Yes.
I don't know his name, if you know what I'm talking about.
I do. I know the series. Yeah.
So those are her other,
See, I torment Snoopy with my crushes. I used to just keep all this in, but she told me once a few years ago that I don't even know how it came up. This is so specific, but she said if she and I were sitting down on our anniversary, candlelight dinner, expensive restaurant, eating the best meal we ever had, but if Tom Cruise's assistant came up and said, ma'am, Tom Cruise would like you to come sit with him, she said she would get up and go sit with Tom Cruise. I'm like, woman, it's on now. You done started a war. So now every chance I get, I'm like, oh, look at her. And I'll just paint a scenario. Yeah, And that's why I came up with the Time Machine and Joni Mitchell 1974 thing. I got to get her back. She hurt my feelings with that Tom Cruise thing. She hurt my feelings. Think about that. Our anniversary, candlelight dinner, a $200 meal on our anniversary, and Tom Cruise's assistant comes and says, "Ma'am, Mr. Cruise would like to speak with you." And she said she would get up and go. I can't let that one go. And we're talking, this is maybe 10, 12 years ago, and I'm still on that.
You should have said, "Well, I'll have to join. I'll be the goose to your Maverick."
I love it. That's a good one. Yeah. No, I don't know. I love my Snoopy. I have to tease her though. I tease her relentlessly. It's good for the marriage. Gotta tease him a little bit. Yeah. Well, Dwayne, this has been a great conversation.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
And we should have done this a long time ago. But like I said, now I'm going to start going through the list and all of the American brothers, Black Americans that are here in Norway. I want to have us on and just to share our experiences and bond a little bit. Like I said, we're kind of cast to different corners of Norway.
Yeah.
But we have to set the stage so that we can find somewhere to get together for a day or even just a day, but preferably a weekend and just hang out.
And this Corona stuff is kind of putting down on a lot of those types of arrangements.
Yeah. My podcast is set up for people to come here to my studio, and I just haven't been able to do that for the last year.
Right.
Yeah. So we will make it happen, Dwayne. We will get together sooner or later. Yeah. But I love talking. Can you stick around for a while I say goodbye to my guests? Stick around. Don't hang up yet. But thanks a lot for coming on, Dwayne.
Okay, thank you.
And to those of you who are listening, thank you for listening to this episode of the Comin Home Podcast with John Allen. Again, please remember to subscribe at your podcast platform of choice. You can find me at John Allen Pod. That is at John Allen Pod, all over social media. Do that. Contact me, talk with me, share your thoughts. Let's argue a little bit too. I'm tired of everybody being so nice. I want a challenge. No, be nice. Keep being nice, but we can still have a discussion at John Allen Pod all over social media. And thanks again to Dwayne. Bye, everybody.